Alright, let's look at 10, Standard 10, Substandard F. This is going to be the last video of Unit 4 and the completion of Standard 10 Substandards. Alright, so it says analyze how the presidential election of 1876 and the subsequent compromise of 1877 marked the end of Reconstruction. So here we see the end of Reconstruction, and what we can do is, if we read this a little closer, we see that we have to analyze. In other words, we have to dig deeper than what's on the surface here. So let's look deeply at why this presidential election of 1876 results in the end of the Reconstruction period. Now we can also infer something here using inferences with the text and in the context of reading the standard. We can infer that there's a conflict here in the surrounding the presidential election of 1876, and the reason we can infer that is by this word compromise. You know, our theme has been conflict and compromise for a good period of time now. So with compromise, we know there's going to be a conflict that results in this compromise being made, and we can also infer that it is this compromise that come from the surrounding conflict around this election that's going to result in this end of Reconstruction. So if you read for context and use these inferences, and you look for these themes, then you can better understand what you're supposed to learn, what the focus is. So let's look at our timeline again. We come up with the Reconstruction events timeline. We went all the way from Abraham Lincoln being assassinated and his proclamation of a 10% plan for Reconstruction, and the Civil War ended all the way through. Now we're here in the end. So Reconstruction, we said, lasted from 1865 to about 1877, which is a span of 12 years. And it ends with the election of 1876, when conflict occurs in this election, arguments, and then this compromise, the resulting compromise, ends in the era of history we know of as Reconstruction, where they were arguing over and had plans for rebuilding or restoring the United States to the United States rather than two separate nations, or supposed two separate nations. Alright, anyway, an election of 1876 involved two men here pictured. Rutherford B. Hayes from Ohio was a Republican candidate for president, and Samuel J. Tilden was a New York candidate for president of the United States. Both of them were governors of their particular states. Alright, so in 1876 there was an election, and in this election the total popular vote was 8,430,783. That was the total popular vote when all the elections counts come in. And in the popular vote, President Rutherford B. Hayes received 4,036,289 votes, with 48% of the popular vote. And then Samuel J. Tilden, the Democrat, received 4,300,590 votes for 51% of the vote. So Tilden received a majority of the vote, so he becomes president, right? No, he doesn't. Doesn't become president, because the presidential election does not work that way. Okay, the people do not directly elect the president of the United States or the vice president. There is no direct election of the president, because our founding fathers, when they created the Constitution, did not want a popular vote of the president of the United States. So Samuel J. Tilden receives 51% of the vote. If he went on popular vote, he would have won and become president, but that didn't happen. In the Constitution, under Article 2, Section 1, and then this was amended with the 12th Amendment, but the wording of the Constitution, our founding fathers wrote this in: each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president. And that's Article 2, Section 1. And let's try to pinpoint some keywords in here and try to see what this means as we read. It says each state can appoint a number of electors equal to the whole number of the senators and representatives that that particular state has and is entitled to in the United States Congress. And I just highlighted this for you to try to make it a little bit easier. And so each state gets to appoint a number of electors, and this number of people is what we call the Electoral College. When every state sends in its number of electors, they have an Electoral College meeting to choose who the president will be. So how do we determine how each state gets members in the Electoral College? Well, they get the same number of electors as they do senators and as they do the number of representatives for their state. So in 1876, Georgia had 11 electoral votes. So we had 11 Electoral College members to choose President of the United States in 1876. Alright, so here you go. Here's the picture of Electoral College results. Here's Georgia, has 11 Electoral College members in the Electoral College. So if you recall, we discussed in the Great Compromise that created our U.S. Congress. This Great Compromise settled and made sure that small states and large states were equally represented by saying that the Senate will always have 2 senators from each state, in other words, equal proportion. And the House of Representatives will be based on population. And every 10 years a census would be taken and the number would change. So that's how they get their representation in the House and in the Senate. So can we determine in the Electoral College how many, if Georgia has 11, can we kind of infer from that or deduct from that how many House of Representatives members Georgia had? Okay, and here's how we do it. If we read back over here, the Electoral College for one state is the number equivalent to the whole number of senators and the whole number of representatives added together. So what we can do is some simple math, some subtraction. If there's 2 senators from every state, there's 11 Electoral College members. All we have to do is subtract 2 senators. And then we would get that there are 9 House of Representatives members with 2. So you take the House of Representatives number, let's see, it says equivalent to the number of senators in House of Representatives, 9, and then 2 senators would give us 11 Electoral College members. So Georgia had 11 Electoral College members, South Carolina 7, Florida 4. You can go around this if you want to and count them up. But altogether there's 369 Electoral College votes. Now, the Constitution says that the Electoral College chooses the president, not the people. And that's why, even though Samuel J. Tilden won 51% of the vote, he won more than Rutherford B. Hayes, he is not going to be the president of the United States because the Electoral College hadn't chosen him yet. So, alright, so we had this. Okay, so we did a little math. Alright, so in 1876 there's 369 Electoral College votes altogether. These in brown were still territories and therefore did not vote in the election. But all the blue and the red states with their electorals, we add them up, 369. So here's how you determine who wins the presidency. Each candidate, the candidate who wants to be president, needs a majority of the vote. They need 51% of the vote. So if we have 369, what we could do is multiply 369 by 50%. And that'll give us 184.5. So we're multiplying here, trying to get our 50% of the majority. 184.5 is 50%. So 185 Electoral College votes were needed to be president of the United States. So whichever candidate received 185 votes would win the presidency. Alright, so the Electoral College vote was counted up. Each state counted theirs up, sent them in, and then the result was that Rutherford B. Hayes received 185 Electoral College votes, and Samuel J. Tilden would receive 184 votes. So what this means, because the Electoral College chooses a president, we see that 185 was needed. was 185 received. So does Rutherford B. Hayes become president? Well, the answer is still no. At this moment, still no. Well, he received 185 it required in the Electoral College, didn't he? Yes, he did. However, the conflict that come about, that we inferred from our stem that we were reading, 10F, resulted when these numbers were actually contested. You know, these are not the correct numbers. Both sides, the Democratic side and the Republican side, said these are the wrong numbers because there were 4 states Electoral College votes were being contested. In other words, in those states, their Electoral College members and the process they go through to give in the votes for the president were in question. They were being contested. So Florida was one, Louisiana was the other state, South Carolina, and then Oregon. So, you know, if we look back at how many those states had, let's look. Florida had 4, South Carolina had 7, Louisiana had 8, and Oregon had 3. I don't know how many of those were being contested, but there's, let's see, 8, 9, 10, 11, 18, 22. So we had 22 Electoral College votes that were being contested. So, you know, 22 of this out of these numbers would definitely make a difference. So what we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is a conflict. Alright, so Democrats are saying no, we won. Republicans said no, we won, because these Electoral College, something went wrong. So the United States Constitution says if something happens, alright, we see the person having the greatest number of votes, in other words, the majority of the whole number of electors, shall be the President of the United States. If no person has such majority, then the House of Representatives would choose immediately by ballot the President. So the House would choose by President. Now, since these other votes were being contested, 22 Electoral College votes were being contested, they decided politically that it should go to the House of Representatives to be determined, since that's what it had here. Okay, but alright, so what they do is they set up a special electoral commission in the House of Representatives, and when it goes there, they're going to make a compromise to settle this conflict. Alright, so we go to the House of Representatives with this special electoral commission, and it is there where it has been suggested, it has been implied that Rutherford B. Hayes and these representatives in the House made a deal. They compromised and made a backroom deal to do certain things for Hayes to be selected as President of the United States. Although some other historians contend, as did the Republicans, that no, they just got reassurances of things Rutherford B. Hayes had already planned on doing to begin with, that he had promised in his campaign. At either rate, a compromise did occur. And number one, Rutherford B. Hayes was chosen president. In other words, the Democrats said we don't mind accepting Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican, as president, as long as you meet these other things that we want. Okay. All right. So let me minimize this so you can see the end of it. All right, there you go. All right, so Rutherford B. Hayes is accepted as president, and then number two, all troops. The agreement was that if he's elected president, remove all troops from the southern states and end Reconstruction. So, you know, those two things are really what's going to end Reconstruction. And then the next thing is appoint a Southern Democrat in President Hayes's cabinet, and eventually he does a Southerner as Postmaster General gets elected eventually. And then Transcontinental Railroad, a contract or agreement, this agreement, they would build a transcontinental railroad from Texas to the Pacific Ocean. I think we talked about that back when we talked about the Kansas-Nebraska Act, but they agreed to do that. And then they agreed to passed legislation that would industrialize the South and help it recover from this Reconstruction had been torn apart during the Civil War. So they all agree on this. Rutherford B. Hayes becomes president, and Reconstruction is ended in the South, and the troops are pulled out, and those 5 military districts are dissolved. So the election of 1876 results in conflict, which then is compromised in the House of Representatives, and then that brings an end to Reconstruction. So I believe we have met our objective. It says analyze how the presidential election of 1876 and the subsequent compromise of 1877 marked the end of Reconstruction. Ask questions in class. Watch this video again. Good luck on the quiz. Good luck on the EOCT.